My husband passed away, then my children tried to claim the company I built to provide. So I acted. The morning after the funeral felt quieter than it should have been. Not peaceful, just empty, like the world had decided to lower its volume and leave her alone with her thoughts. She woke up before the alarm, staring at the ceiling, listening for a sound that would never come again. For years, she had woken up to the soft movement beside her, the sound of another person breathing, the comfort of knowing someone else was there. Now there was only silence, and it pressed down on her chest harder than grief itself. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. She sat up slowly, feeling the weight of the day before it even began. There were children to get ready, bills to check, and messages she had been avoiding since the news spread. Everyone wanted to say something. Everyone wanted to offer words that did not fix anything. She understood they meant well, but each message reminded her that her life had split into a before and an after, and there was no bridge back. The house still looked the same. His shoes were near the door. His mug was still on the counter, washed but not put away. She had not moved it. She did not know why. Maybe part of her believed that if she left things untouched, he might walk back in and complain about how strong she made the coffee. Grief made the mind strange like that. It whispered small lies just to help you stand up and keep going. After the children left for school, she stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the table where they once sat together. She remembered the nights when money was tight, when they talked quietly after the kids slept, counting numbers on scraps of paper. Back then, the business was barely an idea. It was something he dreamed about, something she supported without knowing how important it would later become. When he passed, the business did not stop. Orders still came in. Customers still called. Deadlines still mattered. The world did not pause just because her heart had broken. At first, she thought she would shut it down. The idea of managing it alone felt impossible. She did not see herself as a business owner. She was just a wife who helped sometimes, who listened, who packed boxes when needed. But bills arrived faster than sympathy. Rent, utilities, school costs, medical expenses from the last months of his illness, everything piled up. She realized very quickly that grief did not excuse responsibility. If she wanted to keep a roof over her children's heads, she had to keep going. There was no other choice. So she learned. She learned how to answer emails without crying. She learned how to speak with suppliers even when her voice shook. She learned how to wake up early, make breakfast, send the kids off, then sit down at the same desk he once used and do the work herself. At night, when the house was quiet again, she stayed up late, double-checking numbers, fixing mistakes, teaching herself things she never thought she would need to know. Some nights were harder than others. She would pause, hands resting on the keyboard, and remember how he used to sit there, confident, hopeful, talking about growth and future plans. She wondered what he would think if he saw her now, exhausted but still trying. She hoped he would be proud. Slowly, the business began to change. Not overnight, not in some dramatic way, but through small improvements. She listened more closely to customers. She found ways to cut costs without hurting quality. She made decisions based on survival, not dreams. Every small win felt like a step away from fear, even if the fear never fully left. What surprised her most was herself. She did not feel strong. She felt tired, scared, and unsure most of the time. But she kept showing up. Even on days when her hands trembled as she opened her laptop, she worked. Even when grief hit her without warning, she wiped her face and continued. Strength, she learned, did not always feel brave. Sometimes it just felt like not stopping. Her children noticed the changes before anyone else. They saw her working late. They saw her stress when money was tight and her relief when a good payment came through. They learned to be quieter in the evenings, to help around the house more. She hated that they had to grow up faster, but she was grateful for their understanding. At first, her family checked in often. They offered help, advice, and concern. Some suggested she sell the business and focus on healing. Others hinted that handling everything alone might be too much for her. She nodded politely, thanked them, and did what she felt was right. Selling felt like giving up, not just on income, but on everything she and her husband had built together. Months passed, and the business began to stabilize. Then it began to grow. Not in a flashy way, but enough to bring breathing room. Bills were paid on time. The fridge stayed full. She could say yes to small things for the kids without panicking. For the first time since his passing, she felt a quiet sense of relief. That relief did not mean happiness. She still missed him every day. There were moments when something good happened, and her first instinct was to turn and tell him, only to remember he was gone. Those moments hurt the most. Success felt strange without someone to share it with. As the business grew, so did the attention. People who had not shown much interest before started asking questions. How much was it making now? What were her plans? Did she need help managing things? At first, she thought they were just curious. Family often gets curious when things start going well. She tried to be open, but careful. She shared general updates without details. She had learned, through hardship, to protect what mattered. The business was no longer just a project. It was the reason her children slept safely at night. It was the result of countless sacrifices, missed sleep, and quiet tears. She remembered the early days clearly. The nights she cried in the bathroom so the kids would not hear. The times she almost gave up. The moments she stared at numbers that did not add up and wondered how she would fix them. No one saw those moments. No one except her. Because of that, the business felt deeply personal. It was not just money. It was proof that she survived something that could have broken her completely. It was a symbol of her refusal to let loss define her future. She never thought of herself as powerful or independent. Those words felt too big. She was simply a mother doing what she had to do. But somewhere along the way, without noticing, she had built something solid. Something that worked. What she did not realize was that success changes how people look at you. The same family members who once worried she could not handle things alone now spoke differently. Their questions became sharper. Their advice became more frequent. Their interest felt less like concern and more like calculation. She brushed off the discomfort at first. Grief had already made her sensitive. She told herself she was overthinking. These were her children, her family. They would never see her as a problem. She could not imagine that the thing she built to protect her children would one day be used against her. She could not imagine that the danger would not come from the outside world, from competition or failure, but from the people she trusted the most. At that stage, all she knew was that she was tired but standing, grieving but functioning, afraid but moving forward. Her life was not the one she planned. She never planned to be a widow. She never planned to run a company alone. She never planned to learn so much through pain. Yet every morning, she got up. Every night, she worked until her eyes burned. She told herself she was doing this for them, for the future, for stability. She believed that building something strong would keep her family together. She did not know that strength can attract challenge, and success can awaken greed. She did not know that love, when mixed with money, can change its shape. All she knew was that she had survived the worst moment of her life, and she was still here, still fighting, still believing that everything she was doing would keep her children safe. At that point, she still trusted them. She still believed family meant protection, not threat. And because of that belief, she never saw what was coming next. Time did not heal everything, but it did soften the sharpest edges of grief. The days stopped feeling impossible, even if they still felt heavy. The business settled into a routine, and so did her life. She woke early, worked long hours, and tried to be present for her children in between. It was not perfect, but it was stable, and stability felt like a gift. At first, the children spoke very little about the business. They knew it kept food on the table and lights on in the house. They respected how hard she worked, or at least she believed they did. When they asked questions, it felt natural. How did orders come in? Why did some months look better than others? What did certain words mean? She answered calmly, even proudly at times. It felt good to explain something she had built with her own hands. Their interest seemed harmless. They said they just wanted to understand. They said it would be useful one day. She thought maybe this was a good thing. Maybe they were learning responsibility. Maybe they were trying to support her in their own way. After everything they had lost, she wanted to believe that curiosity came from care. So she explained more. She talked about suppliers and customers, about planning and risk. She shared stories about mistakes she made and lessons she learned the hard way. She did not share exact numbers or deep details, but she opened the door wider than before. At first, their questions came slowly. Then they came more often. They asked how much time she spent working. They asked why she made certain decisions instead of others. They asked what would happen to the business one day. Who would own it? Who would run it? Those questions made her pause, but she brushed the feeling aside. Children think about the future. It was normal. They had lost their father early. Maybe they just wanted reassurance that things would be okay, that the work she was doing would protect them in the long run. She reassured them. She told them there was time, that nothing needed to be decided now, that her focus was keeping things running smoothly and making sure everyone was taken care of. She spoke gently, hoping to keep the mood light. But something subtle began to change. The questions started to sound less like curiosity and more like evaluation. Instead of asking how something worked, they questioned why she did it that way. Instead of listening, they interrupted with suggestions. Instead of support, there was pressure. They began using words like we when talking about the business. We should expand. We should hire someone. We should think about selling one day. She noticed it, but she did not comment. She told herself she was being sensitive again. Grief still made her cautious. She did not want to imagine problems where none existed. Sometimes, they offered to help. At first, it sounded kind. They could handle emails. They could talk to people. They could manage parts of the work so she could rest. The idea was tempting. She was tired. Deeply tired. There were days when even small tasks felt heavy. But she hesitated. Not because she did not trust them, but because the business felt fragile in her hands. It had survived because she knew every detail. She feared that handing over even a small piece might break the balance she worked so hard to maintain. She thanked them and said maybe later. She said she was managing fine for now. Their smiles faded quickly. Not fully, but enough for her to notice. There was a hint of disappointment, mixed with something else she could not name. After that, the tone shifted more clearly. Conversations about the business were no longer casual. They were serious, sometimes tense. They spoke about effort as if it were shared equally. They spoke about ownership as if it were already divided. One evening, while she was finishing work at the table, one of them asked why she still worked so late. The question sounded simple, but the tone carried judgment. She explained that deadlines mattered. That consistency kept customers loyal. That stopping early was not an option yet. The response surprised her. They said she was overworking. That she should step back. That she deserved rest. The words sounded caring, but something about them felt rehearsed. Like advice borrowed from somewhere else. She smiled and nodded, even though her chest tightened. She had learned to avoid conflict whenever possible. Peace felt precious. After losing her husband, she could not bear the idea of losing calm in her home too. So she chose silence. She listened more than she spoke. She changed subjects when conversations felt uncomfortable. She told herself that patience would solve everything. Families argue sometimes. Stress does strange things to people. But the requests kept coming. Can you show us the full accounts? Can we sit in on meetings? Can we be added to emails? Each request was small on its own. Together, they felt like a slow push. She did not give in, but she softened. She shared a little more here, explained a bit deeper there. She wanted to avoid hurting feelings. She wanted to believe that openness would build trust, not weaken it. Inside, though, something felt wrong. She felt watched in a way she had not before. Like her decisions were being measured. Like her authority was being quietly questioned. It was not loud or aggressive. It was calm, polite, and persistent. That made it harder to confront. There was no clear moment to point to and say, "This is wrong." Everything was wrapped in concern, in future planning, in words that sounded reasonable. Challenging them felt unfair, almost ungrateful. She remembered how much she relied on peace to survive the early months alone. Arguments drained her energy. Tension stole her sleep. So she avoided both. She told herself that harmony was more important than control. At night, when the house was quiet, she replayed conversations in her head. She wondered if she missed something obvious. She wondered if she should speak up more clearly. But every time she imagined confronting them, she pictured conflict, raised voices, distance. She was not ready for that. She told herself they were still grieving too. Loss affects everyone differently. Maybe this was how they coped. By focusing on numbers and plans instead of feelings. By trying to secure a future they feared might disappear. That thought helped her justify her silence. It allowed her to sleep, at least a little. It allowed her to keep the peace during the day. But peace built on silence can be fragile. She felt it in the way conversations stopped suddenly when she entered the room. In the way glances were exchanged that did not include her. In the way suggestions turned into quiet expectations. Once, she overheard them talking about the business without her. They spoke confidently, using terms she taught them. They discussed decisions as if they were already involved. She stood still, listening, her heart pounding. When they noticed her, they smiled and changed the topic. She did not mention it. She told herself it meant nothing. Children talk. Families plan. She forced herself to believe that trust still existed, that respect was still there. Deep down, though, a small voice warned her. It whispered that something was shifting, slowly but surely. That the lines between support and control were blurring. That her role was being quietly rewritten. She ignored the voice. She focused on work. On keeping everything running. On avoiding difficult conversations. She had survived worse, she told herself. This was nothing compared to loss. Yet loss had taught her one thing she was forgetting now. That what you avoid does not disappear. It waits. She continued choosing peace, believing it was the kinder option. She did not realize that peace without boundaries can invite harm. She did not realize that by staying quiet, she was allowing others to speak louder. At that moment, she still believed things would settle on their own. That the curiosity would fade. That respect would return naturally. That family love would protect her from anything truly harmful. She was wrong, but she did not know it yet. All she felt was a quiet shift, subtle but steady, moving her from the center of what she built toward the edges, one gentle question at a time. The change did not arrive suddenly. It crept in quietly, wrapped in calm voices and careful words. At first, it sounded like advice. Then it started to feel like direction. One day she realized that suggestions were being made without waiting for her response, as if approval was no longer required. They talked about the business as if it were already separate from her. They discussed plans at the table, during meals that used to be about school, small stories, and shared laughter. Now numbers and future control slipped into conversations meant for rest. She tried to redirect things, but the words kept returning. One evening, someone mentioned that the company should already belong to them. The statement was casual, said between bites of food, like it was an obvious truth everyone had simply avoided saying out loud. She froze for a moment, unsure how to respond. The room felt smaller suddenly. She asked what they meant. The answer came quickly. They said the business existed because of the family, because of shared sacrifice, because it was meant to secure everyone's future, not just hers. The words sounded logical, but something about them felt sharp. She reminded them that the business only survived because she kept it alive after their father passed. That she carried the risk alone. That she worked through grief while learning everything from scratch. Her voice stayed calm, but her hands trembled under the table. The response hurt more than she expected. Someone said she was being emotional. That grief still clouded her judgment. That decisions should be made with a clear head, not with feelings. The words landed heavily, like a quiet insult disguised as concern. She had been called many things in her life, but not that. Not by her own children. Not after everything she had done. She felt heat rise to her face, but she swallowed it down. She did not want to argue. She did not want to turn dinner into a battlefield. She told herself they did not mean harm. Maybe they were worried. Maybe they were trying to protect the future in their own way. Still, something inside her cracked. For the first time, she felt like her role was being questioned, not as a manager, but as a mother. After that night, the tone changed completely. Conversations were no longer gentle. They spoke openly about control, about fairness, about who deserved what. They talked about timelines and ownership as if these things were overdue. She listened, stunned by how quickly the language shifted. There was no request, no discussion about her comfort or readiness. It felt like a decision was being formed without her, right in front of her. At dinner, silence replaced warmth. Every meal carried tension. Forks scraped plates louder than before. Eye contact was avoided. When she spoke, responses were short. When she stayed quiet, the air felt thick with expectation. Love began to feel conditional. When she agreed with a suggestion, the mood softened. When she hesitated, distance followed. Kindness seemed to appear only when she aligned with their ideas. She noticed it, even if she did not name it out loud. One night, she tried to explain herself again. She said she was not against planning. She was not against teaching or preparing. She simply needed time and respect. She needed acknowledgement for what she had carried alone. The answer was cold. They said time was already given. That the business was no longer small. That holding on to control was selfish. That she should trust them if she truly loved them. That sentence stayed with her long after the dishes were cleared. If she truly loved them. She lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, replaying the words. Love had never felt like a test before. Love had never come with conditions. She began questioning herself. Maybe she was holding on too tightly. Maybe fear was guiding her more than wisdom. Grief still lived in her chest, quiet but heavy. She wondered if it was blinding her. At the same time, another thought followed. If this was about love, why did it feel like pressure? Why did it feel like she was being pushed into a corner instead of supported? The business, once a source of strength, now felt like a line drawn between them. Every success turned into a point of tension. Every decision felt watched. She stopped sharing updates altogether. That only made things worse. They accused her of hiding things, of shutting them out, of acting like the business was hers alone. She wanted to scream that it was hers, that she earned every inch of it through pain and persistence. But she stayed quiet. She chose calm again. She chose silence again. She believed that arguing would only deepen the divide. She hoped that time would cool things down, that emotions would settle. But pressure does not fade when ignored. It grows. It finds new ways in. Through tone. Through looks. Through words that sound reasonable but carry weight. She noticed how quickly affection disappeared after difficult conversations. No warm goodnights. No small gestures. Just distance. It felt deliberate, even if it was never spoken. She started eating meals faster, retreating to her room sooner. Work became an escape again. At least there, numbers made sense. Effort led to results. No one questioned her right to decide. Still, the hurt followed her. She thought about the early days, when she worked to protect them, believing everything she built would keep them safe. She never imagined she would need protection from them. The house no longer felt like a place of rest. It felt like a space where she needed to be careful. Careful with words. Careful with reactions. Careful with honesty. She began to understand something painful. That love can change when money enters the room. That respect can fade when power is involved. That family bonds can stretch in ways you never expect. She did not know what the next step should be. She only knew that something had shifted beyond repair. The pressure was no longer subtle. It was real, steady, and close. For the first time since her husband's passing, she felt truly alone, not because she had no one, but because the people around her no longer stood beside her. They stood across from her, waiting. She still hoped it could be fixed. She still wanted peace. But deep inside, a new realization formed. Peace that costs dignity is not peace at all. And whatever came next would force her to choose. The day everything changed did not begin with an argument or a raised voice. It began like any other. She woke early, made breakfast, and reviewed her tasks for the day. There was a sense of routine that helped her stay grounded. Routine had become her shield. She sat at her desk later that morning, opening emails, answering messages, moving through work with familiar focus. Then she noticed something strange. A calendar reminder she did not remember creating. A meeting listed under the business name, scheduled for later that week. She stared at the screen, confused. The meeting included people she worked with regularly. Partners. Advisors. But she was not listed as the organizer. In fact, she was not listed as a participant at all. At first, she assumed it was a mistake. She checked again. The date. The time. The names. Everything looked intentional. Her stomach tightened. She searched through recent emails, scrolling slowly, her heart beginning to race. That was when she found them. Draft documents attached to an email chain she had not been included in. Legal language. Formal wording. Her name appeared several times. Her hands shook as she opened the files. The words blurred for a moment before settling into focus. They were papers meant to transfer authority. Not suggestions. Not proposals. Clear steps outlining how control of the company would move away from her. She felt dizzy. She read the lines again, hoping she misunderstood. But the meaning did not change. These were not plans for the future. They were actions already in motion. Her mind rushed backward, replaying every recent conversation. The questions. The pressure. The comments about her being emotional. The sudden concern for control. It all connected now. This was not advice. This was not worry. This was a takeover attempt. The realization hit her harder than grief ever had. Grief was heavy, but familiar. This was sharp and unexpected. It cut deep because it came from the last place she thought she needed to guard herself. She sat very still, staring at the screen, feeling something inside her collapse. Not the business. Not her strength. Something more personal. Something fragile. She had trusted them. Her thoughts drifted to memories she did not want to face. Late nights packing orders while they slept. Missed meals. Exhaustion. Fear. She had carried all of it so they would not have to. She had built this to protect them. Now it felt like they were trying to take it from her. She closed the laptop slowly and leaned back in her chair. The room felt quiet, too quiet. Her chest hurt, not from panic, but from disbelief. She was not angry yet. She was stunned. When they came home later that day, she watched them carefully. Their voices sounded normal. Their laughter felt out of place. She wondered how long they had known. How many conversations happened without her. At dinner, she said nothing. She listened. They talked casually about unrelated things. No mention of meetings. No mention of documents. The calm felt deliberate. That hurt more than confrontation would have. The silence confirmed what she feared. This was not confusion. This was planning. Later that night, she finally spoke. Her voice was steady, even though her hands were not. She asked about the meeting she found on the calendar. The room froze. The pause before the answer told her everything. They said it was nothing serious. Just preparation. Just making sure things were organized. They said they did not want to stress her out. She asked about the documents. This time, there was no denial. They said it was for the future. That it made sense. That she should not take it personally. That emotions were clouding her reaction. Those words broke something inside her. She was not reacting as a business owner in that moment. She was reacting as a mother. A mother realizing her trust had been quietly dismantled. She asked why none of this was discussed openly. Why decisions about her life's work were made without her consent. The answers came fast, defensive, rehearsed. They said she was difficult to talk to. That she avoided the topic. That someone had to take responsibility. That it was better this way. Better for who? The question stayed unspoken, heavy in the air. She felt tears rise, but she refused to let them fall. She would not give them proof of weakness. She excused herself and went to her room, closing the door gently behind her. Once alone, the shock finally turned into pain. This betrayal did not feel like a business dispute. It felt like abandonment layered on top of loss. First her husband. Now the sense of family she believed she still had. She lay on the bed, staring at the wall, replaying the moment she discovered the files. The calm language. The legal certainty. The absence of her voice. She realized something painful but clear. They did not see her as the foundation anymore. They saw her as an obstacle. The grief she had been carrying shifted shape. It no longer sat quietly in the background. It rose, mixed with shock, disappointment, and a deep sense of betrayal. She had crossed a line she did not know existed. Or rather, they had crossed it for her. That night, she did not sleep. She thought about what this meant. About how far things had already gone. About how little she recognized the family around her. For the first time, she allowed herself to see the situation clearly. Love was no longer guiding these actions. Control was. And once control becomes the goal, nothing is off limits. By morning, the shock remained, but something else joined it. A quiet resolve. She did not yet know what she would do. She only knew that pretending everything was fine was no longer an option. The line had been crossed. And nothing would ever feel the same again. She did not confront them in anger. She did not raise her voice or accuse them the way she had imagined during the sleepless night. Instead, she waited until everyone was home and the house was quiet. She asked them to sit with her, not at the dinner table, but in the living room, where conversations used to feel safer. Her voice was steady when she began. She said she wanted honesty. She said she had seen the documents, the meetings, the plans made without her. She did not insult or threaten. She simply asked them to explain. The response came quickly, almost too quickly. As if they had been waiting for this moment. They said they were protecting the family. They said everything they did was for the greater good. They said she would understand later, that one day she would even thank them. The words flowed smoothly, practiced and confident. She listened without interrupting, though each sentence felt like another stone placed on her chest. They spoke as if the future was already decided, as if the company already belonged to them, and she was only delaying the inevitable. One of them said it made sense for control to shift now, that it was better to act early. Another said she had already done enough and deserved to step back. They spoke gently, but the message underneath was clear. Her time was over. She asked a simple question. When did you decide this without me? No one answered directly. They avoided her eyes. Someone said it just happened naturally. Someone else said it was obvious. No one acknowledged the secrecy. She waited for something else. An apology. A moment of hesitation. A recognition of what she had given up to build the company from nothing after their father died. It never came. No one thanked her. No one mentioned the nights she worked while grieving. No one spoke about the fear she lived with every month when bills were due. Her sacrifices were invisible now, erased by entitlement wrapped in concern. She realized then that this conversation was not about trust or family. It was about control. About who had power and who no longer did. She tried once more. She reminded them that the business existed because she carried it through the hardest period alone. That it was legally and practically hers. That decisions required her consent. They reacted defensively. They said she was making things personal. They said she was emotional again. They said the law could be arranged if needed. That sentence chilled her. Arranged. In that moment, clarity replaced confusion. There was no misunderstanding left to resolve. They did not see her as the owner. They saw her as a barrier. She felt something settle inside her, heavy but calm. The need to be understood faded. She no longer tried to convince them of her worth. The conversation ended without resolution. Not because she gave in, but because there was nothing more to say. She stood up quietly and excused herself. That night, she sat alone, thinking about how easily love had been replaced by expectation. How quickly care turned into calculation. The truth was now clear. This was never about helping her. It was about taking what she built and rewriting the story so her role disappeared. She grieved again, not for her husband this time, but for the family she thought she still had. And with that grief came a new understanding. Love without respect is not love. And concern that ignores consent is not protection. She did not yet know how she would respond. But she knew one thing for certain. She would not disappear quietly. For a long time, her life had been shaped by reaction. She reacted to loss. She reacted to responsibility. She reacted to pressure. Every choice she made was about holding things together for everyone else. Somewhere along the way, she forgot that she was allowed to choose herself too. After the confrontation, she did something she had not done since her husband passed. She paused. She stopped trying to fix the situation emotionally. She stopped explaining herself. Instead, she focused on facts. The next morning, she made a quiet decision. She would no longer rely on hope or patience to protect what she built. She would rely on clarity. She reached out for professional advice. Not to fight, not to threaten, but to understand. She wanted to know exactly where she stood. What was hers? What could not be taken without her consent? Sitting across from someone who spoke calmly and without judgment felt grounding. For the first time in months, she was not being questioned or pressured. She was being listened to. She brought every document she could find. Old agreements. Early registrations. Emails. Notes. Records of payments. Proof of decisions made when she was alone, exhausted, and grieving. As each page was reviewed, something shifted inside her. The story she had been told began to fall apart. The company was hers. Not emotionally. Not symbolically. Legally. Every signature that mattered carried her name. Every risk taken after her husband's death had been hers alone. Every expansion, every contract, every decision that kept the business alive came from her authority. She had not inherited control. She had earned it. The realization brought an unexpected calm. Fear loosened its grip. The tight feeling in her chest eased. For months, she had been made to feel uncertain, fragile, replaceable. None of that was true. She reviewed every major decision she had made over the years. The long nights. The careful planning. The compromises. She saw them clearly now, not through guilt or grief, but through honesty. She had built this company ethically. She paid people fairly. She honored agreements. She made choices that protected the future instead of chasing quick gain. Even under pressure, she never cut corners. And she built it alone. That truth no longer frightened her. It strengthened her. She realized how deeply fear had shaped her silence. Fear of conflict. Fear of losing family. Fear of being alone again. That fear kept her small when she no longer needed to be. Understanding replaced fear. Knowledge replaced doubt. Strength, she learned, does not require permission. It does not ask to be validated. It simply stands. She did not rush back home with anger or victory in her hands. She returned quietly, carrying clarity instead. There was no need to announce anything yet. For the first time since her husband's death, she felt something close to peace. Not the fragile peace that depends on everyone else behaving well. A deeper peace that comes from knowing where you stand. She no longer needed approval. She no longer needed to justify her existence in the space she created. That night, she slept without replaying conversations in her head. Her thoughts were steady. Her heart was calm. Whatever came next, she would face it grounded, informed, and unafraid. She had chosen herself. And that choice changed everything. She chose her moment carefully. Not in the heat of an argument. Not after a long day when emotions ran thin. She waited until the house was calm, until everyone was present, until there was no excuse to misunderstand her words. She did not sit them down as a warning. She spoke as a decision already made. Her voice was steady. Not cold. Not angry. Simply firm. She told them the company would remain under her control. There would be no transfers. No shared authority. No quiet changes made behind her back. What she built would stay where it belonged. She did not apologize for the decision. She did not soften it with promises. She stated it plainly, like a fact. Then she addressed the part she knew they would resist most. If they wanted a role in the company, it would have to be earned. Through effort. Through respect. Through trust rebuilt over time. Not demanded. Not assumed. The reaction came immediately. One of them grew angry. They accused her of being controlling. Of choosing power over family. Of refusing to let go. The words were sharp, meant to provoke guilt. She listened without interrupting. She did not defend herself. She did not raise her voice. She waited until the anger ran out of energy. Another said nothing at all. Silence filled the room where agreement once lived. That silence felt heavy, but also honest. She acknowledged their feelings without bending her decision. She said she understood they were disappointed. She said she was not shutting them out of her life. She was protecting what she built. For the first time, she did not explain herself beyond that. There was a moment when the old fear tried to return. The fear of distance. The fear of being alone. She felt it rise and then pass. She had already faced worse. She stood firm. The conversation ended without resolution, but with clarity. The line was no longer blurred. It was visible, unmistakable. That night, the house felt different. Quieter. Not peaceful yet, but honest. She sensed resentment in the air, but she also felt something else. Relief. She had said no without collapsing. She had chosen boundaries without cruelty. She had stood in her truth without permission. Whatever followed, she knew she could endure it. Because strength, once claimed, does not need to shout. It simply remains. Time did not fix everything, but it revealed what was real. The noise faded. The arguments stopped. What remained was quieter, slower, and more honest. The company survived. So did she. Work continued, not without challenge, but without fear. Decisions were made with confidence instead of doubt. The business no longer felt like something she needed to defend every day. It felt steady again, grounded in the same values that built it in the first place. At home, things were different. Not warm in the way they once were, but clearer, The assumptions were gone. The unspoken expectations no longer hung in the air. Conversations were shorter, more careful. Respect replaced entitlement. It did not arrive with apologies or emotional speeches. It arrived quietly, through distance, through acceptance, through the realization that her decision would not change. Some relationships shifted permanently. She accepted that without resentment. Not everything that changes is meant to return to its old shape. She spent time reflecting on everything she had learned. About grief. About strength. About the cost of silence. She realized how easily love can become tangled with control when boundaries are missing. She also learned something important about herself. Motherhood does not mean surrender. Providing for children does not mean losing oneself. She had spent years believing that sacrifice was the highest form of love. That giving more meant caring more. That staying quiet meant keeping peace. Now she understood the difference. True care includes self-respect. Protection includes boundaries. Love does not require disappearance. She thought about her husband often, but the memories no longer hurt the same way. She believed he would understand her choice. She believed he would be proud, not because she held on to control, but because she refused to be erased. The company remained what it had always been. A place built from effort, responsibility, and resilience. Not a symbol of power, but of survival. And she remained who she had become. A woman who learned that dignity is not something you defend loudly. It is something you keep by standing firm. The final lesson settled gently but clearly. Sometimes protecting what you built means protecting your dignity first.